The rapid rise of terrorism today and the growing power of weapons available to extremists leave us with a growing sense of insecurity. We know there's evil in the world and that it must be contained, but we're not anxious to send men and women into battle when we can see the horrific effects of war every night on TV. The history of warfare is marked by periodic leaps in technology. The introduction of the French longbow brought an age of longer-range combat. The introduction of Asian gunpowder into Europe brought an end to the dominance of the sword. And the use of air power in World War I meant that either side could strike at the heart of the enemy long before their soldiers had even approached enemy lines. Warfare is still driven by advances in technology. Today we have so-called smart bombs that use onboard computers to control the precision of their hit. We have bunker busters, bombs that will penetrate deep into the earth or through thick layers of concrete before they explode. And we have cruise missiles, these planes without pilots that will fly up to 1,000 miles and still hit a target the size of a single-car garage. Soldiers may soon be wearing nutrition patches to provide them with essential vitamins through their skin. Their uniforms will plug them into computer networks through a special display in their helmet. And nanotechnology, where things are built from the molecular level up, will bring amazing breakthroughs in weapons, in battlefield medicine, and in tools for spying on the enemy. Clearly, having sophisticated software doesn't mean you can rule out the loss of civilian life. During the Second Gulf War, Western allies used intercepts of satellite phone calls to track down enemy targets, and that was accurate down to a distance of 100 meters. But you can still fit a lot of people inside a 100-meter circle. Trying to pinpoint specific targets may be much better than bombing entire cities, but there's still a huge margin for error. Human rights groups estimate that as many as 10,000 innocent people might have been killed during the initial invasion of Iraq. Appreciating the technology is all well and good, but we're still talking about killing people. For those of us who've never experienced the hardships of war firsthand, it can be hard to imagine what it's like to find yourself in a battle zone. For those who are called on to fight, going to war means separation from loved ones, constant physical discomfort, and the ongoing threat of pain and death. For war's innocent victims, it means violence, of course, but also the leftover horrors of poverty, sexual abuse, and starvation, to name just a few. Afghanistan was already a desperately poor country with few food reserves when the bombing of the Taliban began in 2002. Distributors of foreign food aid had to flee the country at a time when 320 tons of food was needed every month to feed starving millions. In a war, it's all too easy to destroy the very values we claim to be protecting. Churchill put it this way: to build up may be the slow task of years, but to destroy can be the thoughtless act of a single day. During the Renaissance, a Florentine political philosopher called Niccolò Machiavelli taught that war is a legitimate tool to be used for political gain. Princes, he said, should treat peacetime as a temporary breathing space, a chance to plan for new wars. He wasn't a total warmonger, despite those heady words, but his name has become linked with the dark side of political manipulation. Thankfully, Machiavelli's views on war are not widely held today, except among tyrants, of course. But many peace-loving leaders have warned that war is sometimes necessary as a last resort. Winston Churchill steered his nation through one of the bloodiest wars in human history. He said the price of peace is eternal vigilance. He also subscribed to a philosophy known as just war theory. Now, to some people it can seem foolish to even mention justice and ethics when you're talking about war. But supporters of the theory say they're not excusing war, They're showing how wrong it is, except in exceptional circumstances. It was classical philosophers who first gave us the ideas behind the so-called just war theory. But those ideas were added to by theologians like St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas. Augustine tried to reconcile the fact that Christianity challenges any use of violence, and yet it says that human governments are responsible for the common good of their people. He recognized that if people are going to lead productive and fruitful lives, they need to live in an environment of peace where they're protected from evil. To achieve that, he said, legitimate governments might sometimes have to use force. According to the theory, force can only be justified when it's necessary to defend against attack, to retake something that was lost, to protect the weak, or to right a wrong. And a war must be declared by the right authority, by the legitimate government acting in a lawful way. It must also represent a proportionate response taken only after peaceful diplomacy and sanctions have failed. The theory also stipulates that it's unacceptable to use certain kinds of weapons or to fight innocent civilians and children. Of course, war is a messy business. Things seldom go according to plan, which is why many people totally reject the idea of a just war. In the age of weapons of mass destruction, they say, how can you possibly talk about limiting civilian casualties or proportionate responses? And how do you apply the idea of a just war to the world of terrorism? Terrorists, after all, seldom represent any legal government, and they don't respect any morality except the one they invent for themselves. Some religious leaders will say that pacifism is the only proper response to international conflicts. Others will say that a Christian has the right to fight or not to fight based on his or her conscience, but that's not the required response from every believer. I think that Christianity recognises the very real difference between the world as we'd like it to be and the way it actually is. In this fallen world, evil must often be confronted and contained, even by force, before it can be overcome. According to the Christian scriptures, God's ultimate intention for his world is peace. But that will only be fully realised when Christ returns as the Prince of Peace. Until then, wars will continue like labour pains before the birth of a new era. But people of good conscience, goodwill, should try to live together in peace, and Christians in particular should announce the coming kingdom by loving their enemies and praying for their national leaders. John Milton once wrote that peace has her victories, no less renowned than war. Peace should always be our first goal, and force an absolutely last resort. Sometimes, though, harsh realities demand a response that higher ideals would rather avoid. We'd love to hear your views on this very important subject. Why not send us an email? The address is mel@edges.tv, or you can share your thoughts through our website at edges.tv.